and welcome to the Green Team of the Legendarium. Today we'll be covering A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. I'm Ashaman, and today I am joined by Kyptan,
Heyo.
Hurinfan,
안녕하세요.
and Stormrunner.
How's it going?
Today we will be doing a spoiler-free discussion followed by a spoiler-filled discussion of the book. Starting with, of course, yes, the spoiler-free discussion. So, initial thoughts. Kip.
I've already read this book, so this is a reread for me. But my initial thoughts are that I like it a lot more this time. It's something that maybe I wasn't quite so ready for back when I was a little kid. But this time around, I am not worrying about everything needing to be so exciting and tension-filled.
Yeah, I suppose I should probably introduce the book a bit. This is a... Oh, when was it published? Let's quickly go check.
1937.
1937. Oh my god. 19. Yeah, it's first published in 1968 by sci-fi and fantasy legend Ursula K. Le Guin. It is an absolute classic, published somewhat in response to Lord of the Rings, I believe. Ursula Le Guin had said. It features a coming-of-age story where the wizard Ged is taken to a school of magic, and he learns magic, and he unleashes a demon, and has to reckon with the fact that he unleashed a demon. And
Are we allowed to call him Ged? It seems kind of personal.
oh, that's true, Sparrowhawk. Features of this book include naming magic, where there are true names of things, and the names give you power over said things. It's a very mythical style, and features it's a very non-white cast, which was pretty unique for fantasy at the time, especially in the West. But yes, with that out of the way, Kieran, what are your thoughts before we really get started talking?
I'm with Kyptan. Like I've read it before, and I thought it was fine. Well, I thought it was good, but I feel like I got a whole lot more out of it this time. I paid more attention to the prose style and the themes that she was exploring, and it was a very tightly written, good story, like a coming-of-age story, and you could see how influential it is, especially after reading everything that came afterwards, like Harry Potter.
Harry Potter or King Killer?
King Killer. Yeah, okay. Both quite a bit.
Yep. Stormrunner.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the book. Similar to both what Huron and Kyptan were saying, I thought it was a really cool coming of age story. That I appreciated that her style felt similar to a Narnia-esque era fantasy book, but a bit more modern or modern-ish, and a little more original. And that it followed some tropes, but didn't necessarily, but definitely. I don't want to say subvert because that word gets thrown around a lot, but definitely plays with different tropes in non-traditional ways.
Was this your first time with the book, or are you rereading it?
Yes, this was my first time.
Ah, yeah. Excellent. We have a first-time reader.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm the guinea pig.
Yes, because I also had read this because I had heard it was a classic, and I loved it the first time. I loved it more this time. I would call it an almost perfect novel. Given what she was trying to do, it's beautifully written. You can really tell she knows what she's doing, and she's doing it very well. And
smart lady. This is around the time she was writing the Hainish cycle too. Yeah,
a little before.
I love her Hainish books.
Yeah,
I do not know her detailed bibliography.
Yeah, me neither. I
have the information at my fingertips. Go ahead, Ash. I'll just interject while you're talking.
Yeah, it's called a children's book, and this is one of those children's books that's like really it's for everybody. And I think that when you read it will have a
So
huge
so
impact
what
on
what
you
date
know
did
it.
we say this book was published?
1968.
I said
Okay, yeah.
38. Or
Yeah, he said
37.
38.
Yeah, 38
Hey,
would be impressive.
38 is it's closer to the real publishing date than it is now.
That's true. Yeah. I think it's also before Ursula Le Guin was alive.
Maybe.
No, she was born in
don't know.
29.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, still, it would have been a very impressive book for a 9-year-old.
Yeah, and this would have been during. It looks like during the Hainish cycle being published.
Yeah, basically the same time.
But yeah,
A couple years after the first one.
Yeah, so I think we should, for the spoiler-free section, we should talk a bit about the characters and how much we liked them or didn't like them. Personally, I think they're the weakest part of the book, but they're also not emphasized very much. Like that's not what's going on. It's almost like a sci-fi story in that it's the ideas and the themes and the
Philosophy.
yeah, and getting lost in the story that's important. It's not so much the interpersonal dynamics of Earthsea. Those are pretty sparse, although
Yeah,
there are some really there are good characters. It's just they're not the focus. They're not what she's really caring about. I
Okay,
think.
very much correct. Yeah.
I'm going to agree and disagree with you because
Mhm.
this book has one character, and
Basically.
everybody else in the story serves as a function for him to grow.
Mhm.
And so yes, everybody else is not really particularly interesting, only in contrast to Ged himself. But Ged, I'd say, is actually a very interesting character, and the entire book is about Ged and his struggle with his self and understanding himself better and growing. And in that case, I'd say it's actually fantastic character work for Ged.
That's fair. I would agree with that. It's very much a coming of age story, and it conveys very well how lonely that process can be or can feel.
and it seems, and maybe I'm projecting just the other books I've read, or the few other books I've read from her, but those weren't particularly character focused either. At least speaking of, at least the Dispossessed and Left Hand of Darkness. So maybe that's more just her style or what she typically tends to focus on, or also just representative of science fiction or fantasy at the time.
I'd say both of those stories are similar to this in that the other characters aren't important. It's about a single idea. More, it's more about the exploration of ideas, but those ideas are explored through the focus of a single, very important, I think, well realized character, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Get
Yeah.
is super. Oh, gosh.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Get is super well realized, at least in the sense that you do understand at least the emotional journey that he goes on.
I think like in many things, this book is really hampered in its ability to portray detail by its length. So if we're comparing it to well realized characters, we can only be comparing it to other books of about this length.
I somewhat agree. The length does limit what you can do, but I think as we see um, series like Malazan, you can do a lot with
One
character work
page.
in like one page.
Oh,
Um,
you can do very good character work, but you're not going to have like huge amounts of detail at the end of it. You can have
that's true.
complexity, sure, but you won't have detail.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's a good idea to bring up length. This is very short. It's like in my copy, it's like 167 pages. I finished it in about 3 hours yesterday. I started and finished in 3 hours.
Yeah, it took about 3 hours as well.
I took closer to 5, but I was not super focused.
Yeah, I read it a while ago, and it was not that quick. But I read it was mostly at over like a week or so when I had time. So it's a pretty short book.
It's very
And
economical.
yeah, and in terms of plot, my biggest issue with the book actually is that I think it starts out pretty slow, or I don't actually like the start very much. But once you get past a certain point, it just flows so well. very easy to just keep reading, and one thing after another, they make so much sense, and events happen pretty quickly, which
Very, very quickly. It's speed
yeah,
running almost.
yeah, but it doesn't feel rushed to me.
Yeah, and it also
No.
doesn't feel like it plods. I usually don't love travel sections in books, but I actually find myself enjoying these travel sections. Like they're getting into stuff that at times I felt like I was reading Zelda Wind Waker the book. But in a
That's fair.
in a fun way where it just felt like an extra connection to the book, and in a sequence that I wouldn't typically be drawn to.
There's a lot of travel sections, and I agree they're really fun to read. And can we talk about the setting, because I love the setting,
Mhm.
and I feel like I don't see it very often in this. Let's see, what most recent book I read that's in a similar setting would probably be damn, what's it called? Trader Baru Cormorant, and that was only part of the book. Where
That
you're in
was
like
a
this.
very small amount of the book, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like just a small coastal island. It's our archipelago, right? And each island it has its own, customs, its own cities, and you kind of learn about that. Uh, I don't know. I really like the setting, and I wish more books would do that.
Yes, even just
Oh,
maritime settings in general, they're not very common, it feels
Forge of
like.
the High Mage. I just read about Flar, and that setting was exactly this.
Oh, yeah. Ian Siasamont is the fantasy author that I've read that likes ships the most, I think.
If you want to read ships, read Esselma.
Yeah. Yeah, with regards to the setting, I really appreciate how very different all of the locations feel, and the story it feels dreamlike in a lot of sections. Like sometimes you're into nightmare, sometimes um, sometimes like an adolescent fantasy. And going back and forth between those in a very again, it flows. It feels so natural. It's not jarring, even though there are a lot of sections in the book very close together that feel incredibly different.
Yep, she does atmosphere very, very well.
Yeah,
And like I said, very economical, which is just amazing in my opinion.
yeah,
Considering how fast it moves and how many locations they go to and how through language they could still make it feel so different.
I like how she can make up short little words like Mage Wind and Bane Fire, which she doesn't have to explain. They just,
It makes
uh,
sense.
yeah, they make sense, and you see them used in context, and you get it.
yeah. That's a real talent too, knowing how when you can do that, and
Wordsmithing.
yeah, which is appropriate given that the magic in this book is mostly word magic, and I like obviously magic words is not a
Her invention.
concept. No, not at all. Not at all. It's like in every mythology, basically, including the Bible.
Yeah.
But
But
I don't think that most fantasy had played with it before her.
definitely not in a college on an island in a tower.
Yeah. Reading this book actually, it more than anything this time, it made me want to um, run a tabletop role playing game campaign. That's what it felt like to me.
It'd be a cool setting.
Yeah.
It'd be
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah. Shall we discuss themes?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I think so.
Excellent. So, self-discovery, and I would say self-discovery, coming of age, and balance are the main ones in this. Would you guys agree?
Power and ambition are pretty important.
Realization that other people have their own life.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And grappling with the ugly parts of yourself, or parts of yourself that you think are ugly.
Yeah,
Yes.
so yeah, like self-doubt and insecurities. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously we can't discuss them too much without getting into spoilers. But how do you like? How do you guys like how these themes were portrayed and explored? To me, they feel like the focus of the novel, and they're explored beautifully.
I think especially the idea of the shadow and the self and the cosmic balance and like I said, the pride and ambition are really what more than anything is what the novel's about, and everything else is just dressing around that, if that makes sense.
Very good dressing. Yeah,
Oh
And
yeah,
also
it's
just
great.
what it means to grow up.
yeah, Yeah, and make mistakes and make them right.
Which again,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, feeds into that theme of self-discovery
Mhm.
Yep.
and the shadow
Yep.
self and understanding about yourself. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that this is name magic, and to know the name of something is to have control over it. You can see it in lots of stories, but I'm not going to probably talk about that later. But that theme also uh, works together with some of the other stuff, and it's just so tightly structured, I suppose.
Stormy, you were about to say something before hearing so rudely interrupted earlier.
Oh, I think just in general with the uh going back to the making mistakes and that, because I mean that takes up a very large portion of the book, and grappling with, without saying more, just grappling with those consequences is a big part of the plot.
Yeah, doing things that can't ever be really made right, but having to move on regardless. And uh, I would say also wisdom versus intelligence or knowledge.
Mm.
That's a big one, and the crucial importance of becoming wise and the process that is,
And the duty.
and the duty. Yeah, a lot of poop.
It's a big duty.
Okay, I, I I feel like that's probably enough for non-spoilers. Like,
Do we have any listener questions that could be answered without spoilers?
actually, yes, we do. Befuddled Panda asks, "Would Panda like this book?" Okay, this is obviously an impossible question to answer because I don't think anybody really understands what Panda likes about books.
I
I don't
definitely
think
don't.
Panda understands what Panda likes about our books.
I'll
Yeah,
defer to you folks on that.
um, I, I think if Panda, if you're in the right mood, I don't know what that mood is. If you're in the right mood, you have like 3 days. I think you would enjoy this book, so long as you know what you're going into beforehand, and you're not expecting rip roaring action or like super exciting character dynamics. If you're just in the mood for a really beautiful story, I think this would be good.
Yeah, while the book move, yeah, while the book does move quickly, yeah, it's not. It's certainly, it takes its time to get places, but it does move fairly quickly, at least in terms of plot points.
And it's
Yes.
not afraid of a time skip.
No.
Any time skips.
And there are parts of it that I would say are intentionally kind of boring, although they're not very long. In a similar vein, Lady Sweden wants us to persuade her to give it another chance. She read it coming out of Mistborn, which I think is probably a huge factor there, because I almost cannot think of two books that are aimed at a YA audience that are like more diametrically opposed in terms of their content and what they're trying to do.
Yeah, Mistborn's aiming to give you things you can visualize in a cinematic fashion in your head and a deep understanding of the nuts and bolts of a magic system. And Earthsea is asking you to put yourself in the body of a young boy and follow him along as he makes a bunch of mistakes in a world which is more myth than fact at times and more blur than vision.
Yeah, it's an impressionistic painting.
Yeah,
Also, the prose style couldn't be any different, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
that too.
Yeah,
That
and
too.
the philosophies of Le Guin and Sanderson are very different. Le Guin was early on the Eastern philosophy train in the West, and also, of course, this book draws a lot from Jung. And
Hey, both of the books are about. Sorry, I can't say this.
you're gonna just spoil both of them. Um, okay. Nat asks, I'd mentioned that Le Guin is in the same breath as Tolkien as fundamental for modern fantasy. Do you feel like Wizard of Earthsea is appropriately appreciated by the literary scene and readers alike? Literary scene, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Readers, I
No.
think, yeah, not nowadays. but
Unfortunately, I think
was
she's
pretty popular
been kind of
back in the day.
forgotten by many. She has not been forgotten by writers or the literary scene because she, among like Gene Wolfe, basically her and Gene Wolfe, and then some of the people who kind of pretend like they don't write fantasy but they actually do, uh, are the two names that are like kind of acceptable to talk about in the wider literary world. But yeah,
Yeah.
authors really appreciate Le Guin. Readers nowadays, not so much, I don't think, which is a shame.
Yeah, because I've heard of, obviously she's talked about a lot in fantasy sci-fi circles, but like a lot of my friends or that would have heard of, say, maybe a Sanderson or a Rothfuss or a Martin would not have necessarily, like, probably not have heard of her.
Yeah, and definitely no one who's not many Rowling fans. Not a high percentage of Rowling fans.
Yeah.
This book is Harry Potter.
Riordan fans.
Yeah. This book is Harry Potter. I would say this book is. I would say it's better than Harry Potter in every sense except for the comfy nature of it. I think Harry Potter is comfy fantasy,
Good.
and it does that very well.
I won't get. I can't talk about without spoils, but like Harry Potter took this. Harry Potter took this. Harry Potter took this. Harry Potter took this. Harry Potter took this.
Yep.
Yeah, I found myself thinking. Yeah, like more. I found myself thinking more about King Killer than Harry Potter, but the age is more comparable to Harry Potter. I feel like maybe it's just just because I haven't read a lot of Le Guin, but I feel like she isn't talked as, or I haven't heard of her referenced as much in terms of fantasy, and that it's usually sci-fi that she talks about more frequently.
She's definitely talked about. She's appreciated most in terms of sci-fi. I think this is because sci-fi is seen as a more literary genre, and the people, so, and as well, her stuff in sci-fi was, the ideas were more interesting at the time. Like Left Hand of Darkness was very influential.
Oh, hey, you brought it up.
Yeah, it was very influential in talking about feminist issues and gender issues at a very early time in the discourse, and she was incredibly influential at the start of that. And it was also it's very interesting tracking her understanding of those concepts over her career.
I think The Left Hand of Darkness is probably the book that you hear mentioned most if someone's going to give you a specific Le Guin book.
Mm-hmm. Left Hand of Darkness is fantastic. I prefer The Dispossessed.
And that's fine. That's totally fine. But by popular metrics and like what gets reported on and written about in articles, I hear about Left Hand of Darkness way more.
That's true. It's absolutely true.
I think as a book, this is far better. But I understand totally why Left Hand of Darkness is talked about more.
This book is aided by, or could be aided by being, since it's less dense than those. But again, it depends. Like if you're looking for the ideas, in particular socio-political philosophy, like that's not what this is about. Mm-hmm. Whereas, that's the point of Dispossessed.
Quite a bit denser
than Left Hand of Darkness or Dispossessed.
Yeah, like like I've talked about the economy of language that she used. Like in a 3-hour book, the thematic exploration that she does in this book is incredible, and both of those books are quite a bit longer.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
D asks, okay, we've already kind of answered this. What other works would you compare it to in terms of prose, language, and tone? In terms of prose, I would kind of compare it to Guy Gabriel K. I'm doing that a lot these days. She has a similar mastery of prose and a mythic feel to her prose, and often a dreamlike feel to her prose. And Kay does those as well, but they are, besides that, very different fantasy authors.
Yeah, Rothfuss was the one that, like, yes, the Harry Potter with the magic school, and this is full spoilers, right? Just to double check.
No, not yet.
Or okay,
no,
right, okay.
Nope, we're not.
We'll start that very soon.
Okay. I found myself thinking more of Rothfuss just because you have a school section and then a not school section, and then obviously like the naming, magic system, and kind of how it's certain parts are more dreamlike, but other parts are more concrete in how they're like painted, so to speak.
And I would say in both stories, the protagonists create almost all the problems for themselves. They're hugely talented. They have a huge amount of potential, and yet they are absolutely unable to control themselves at times, which causes all manner of problems.
I would compare Le Guin more to Terry Pratchett, but if he was just a bit darker and more serious.
And less angry.
I thought her style was probably closest to Tolkien.
I can see it.
In the Silmarillion, maybe.
No,
Which is
like,
K.
a lot of it is K. No, just like his other than maybe The Hobbit, it has a very lyrical and poetic feeling to it, and she uses a very fantastical words, I suppose you could say, that Tolkien was known for. He wanted to give a feeling that something was old and lost and forgotten, and she has this feeling of myth around this story. Hell, the whole thing ends with something. Oh, well, this was the story, and I don't know. I think it was like Tolkien.
I get with the Hobbit. Okay,
I don't know.
I could see the Hobbit comparison for sure, especially with some of the somewhat storybook and somewhat episodic nature that it's told in. Like, I could definitely see the Hobbit comparison.
For Terry Pratchett, I want to compare it to like specifically the Tiffany Aching books, where you have like a young wizard growing up on the chalk and meeting a wizard who then sends them off to another wizard.
This is talking about the narrative. I thought we were talking about prose style.
Yeah, but the prose style, like surrounding the chalk and surrounding Gaunt, really resonates with me there.
Okay, well, yeah.
Yeah, I would say similar to Tolkien. This feels like a story that's meant to be read aloud to another person. Although, might I say that I very much appreciate how when she's describing travel, she's not like, and now Ged turned around and went on this way for this many leagues, and he saw some seaweed in the Gulf and thought that seaweed was great. Like, Tolkien is very wont to have very detailed explanations of what the traveling is looking like. As far as
it's also not Robert Jordan in that sense, which I think was a positive.
Yes.
This is nothing like Robert Jordan, I agree.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. No.
Even though they both had Eastern influences, I would say Le Guin is smarter about it.
Just better about it.
What'd you say?
More concise, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I think she's just a better writer than Jordan.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that.
I totally see the similarities to Tiffany Aching as well. They're also both willing to kind of throw you like gut punches and continue on with the narrative.
I love Tiffany.
Second thoughts.
Yeah. Gad definitely learns the importance of second thoughts. And third thoughts even, maybe. So, shall we move on to spoiler section? We've talked spoiler free for very long, I think.
Spoilers.
Read this book if you like fantasy and don't need a huge amount of action. It's
short.
It's very short.
It's one of those books where I think you kind of need to read it if you want to understand the history of the magic school genre.
Yeah, I think this. I agree. I won't say anymore.
Yeah, as I said, I think it's pretty much a perfect book. Okay, spoiler section. If you haven't read it, then I know this isn't a horrible one to have spoiled, but we're gonna start spoiling it. So, I guess the thing to talk about is all the events of the book, starting in sequential order. So the start of the book, kind of boring. Until he meets Ogion or Augian. I don't know how it's pronounced. Until he meets him, I kind of didn't like the book.
I did.
I thought the mist spell was cool.
Yeah.
I thought that was one of the most interesting parts of the book, and I don't know, the story about a guy with a dead mother who gets to live with his aunt and learn magic.
and she tries to bewitch him.
I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. I felt connected to Ged already then. So
I love a young mage who's thirsty for knowledge. Always a great start.
He's so thirsty. And
it's his downfall.
he gets consumed with it so quickly, and I like how it's just kind of like repeated over and over again until he ends up finally summoning the shadow. Like when he's arguing with Jasper, like to me, it doesn't even seem like Jasper's being all that bad to him. Ged is just so prideful and so arrogant and so determined to be the best that he completely torpedoes any chance of a friendship that they could have had. Because Vetch, I think it is, Vetch has a fine friendship with him, as said.
Yep.
Like there's no issues there.
Not only that, like he seemed very insecure in his lack of knowledge, which is also kind of what spurs the shadow, right? And I think that's often what's moving him forward in his quest for knowledge is just that insecurity.
Yeah. Jasper was being continuously condescending, but Ged could have reacted better.
Yeah, he was only I think Jasper's only doing that because he knew
he's
it was
afraid.
bothering Ged.
Yeah, I think he did it because he knew Ged was stronger.
Well, that's part of it too. But like, think of I don't remember her name. She later became the Temptress. What was her name?
Sarah?
Sarah sounds right. She was pushing his buttons the same way. She's like, "Oh, can't you do this? Can't you do this? Can't you do this? Oh, maybe you should read this book."
She had more of a goal.
Yeah, she had more of a goal, but she was pushing his buttons in the exact right way.
Oh yeah.
And it was all fueled by his thirst for knowledge and partially for wanting to show off his power, and his insecurities about not knowing.
And it wasn't even, the boy wants to show off for the girl because he thinks to himself that she's quite ugly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because she's so pale, which I thought was a nice touch. But I kind of don't trust that Jasper was being condescending to him in the beginning. Like initially it's like, Ged thought that he saw this twist to his lips that made him think that he was laughing at him, and then he started being really quite rude to him at the start.
He's just like, do you know this? Do you know this? He didn't know those things, and then Ged got defensive about it.
Yeah,
and he viewed the interactions through that lens.
Ged was trying to behave like an adult wizard from the second that he got his first spell.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
I was almost more engaged by their rivalry than something like the ones from Harry Potter in particular, and maybe the King Killer one, but I thought it was an engaging rivalry, at least to read about, despite Ged being more prideful than some of the other protagonists. Well,
not more prideful.
Shouldn't say that. Yeah, I shouldn't say more prideful, but him being more proactive was an interesting take on that.
You know what this reminds me of?
I thought Jasper had some good puns and digs. That's what I'll say about him.
Yeah.
Okay, this reminds me of Maverick and Iceman in Top Gun.
You're a loose cannon, Ged. You're gonna get us all killed.
Because they have the same flaws, and he's exploiting these flaws. And the comparisons kind of stop there, but they are similar in some ways.
Yeah, they're all the poor kids that came from disadvantaged background, meeting up with the privileged guy, basically, who's got a leg up on them initially.
So Draco versus Harry?
Yeah.
Yep. Mega school. They got another a teacher who sacrifices himself. Ged gets a scar in his showdown with his nemesis, which is also a shadow, but whatever.
Yeah, which is just himself.
Which is himself.
Which is himself.
Yeah. Which is pretty perfect. But also, Jasper is the wizard that comes, is the lost wizard that comes to him, right, and tells him to go to Cetra. What's her name? Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah.
I think it's the implication, right?
Is it? You don't think he would have recognized him? He'd seen him a lot more recently than he'd seen Sarah.
Yeah, but like the that section of the novel is like everything is so vague. Ged doesn't like it feels like Ged basically doesn't even know where he is at any given point. He's just kind of like lost in a shadow realm, essentially. And at that point, Jasper, okay, whoever this mysterious mage was, had given himself to that old god, old power of the earth. That's it.
Yep.
So I would buy that it would have, we also know that there's illusion magic. So I think there's a lot of ways that he could have just not seen.
Jasper was good at illusion magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Ged's really good at seeing through it.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't think they're the same person.
I don't think they're the same person. I think it's just a random one-off character.
Who's the Lady of O? Is that Sarah?
No, different lady,
Okay.
equally beautiful in Ged's mind.
I see. Oh yeah, there's the little scene where the lady visits Roke and
Yes.
Jasper that puts on a little performance for her, and then just Ged's entire night is ruined because he's like, I could have done it better. He's just so bitter.
Yep.
But I also really like that after his shadow is separated from him, like I think it's clear. It's just like this was entirely himself, the ugly parts of himself, and they separated out. After this happened, he kind of loses his drive. He's missing very crucial aspects of himself, like that passion, that fire that was in him before, and he's not able to learn magic as quickly, and he's not
gave
as
it up.
driven. Yeah, there's an episode of Star Trek that kind of deals with this as well. The first generation or original series, sorry.
Oh yeah.
Which one?
The one where Kirk is separated from himself.
Right.
Teleporter accident. Teleporter.
Yeah, I know that one.
Yeah, it's interesting in that like some of our most explicit mentions of that are from Ged's mouth. He says, "I gave up my power. I'm not that person anymore." He takes longer to memorize names. He takes longer to learn other things. But then other people come back to him and say, "You can't just give up that kind of power.
Yeah.
It's going to come back to you, or it's going to come back to you tenfold, or you will be reunited." And it's heavily foreshadowed that there will be a reunion and a rekindling of that ambition and power eventually.
Yeah, he almost knew to some extent early on what he was going to have to do, and didn't really want to address it internally.
Yeah, he had been traumatized by this experience and by the ugliness that he had shown, and he didn't want to. He tried to run from it. He tried to fight it. He tried to destroy it, and none of that worked. He needed to integrate.
Tried to find harbor from it.
Yeah, he tried to find harbor from it. Yeah, and he did for a while. He just didn't go out into the world. He didn't do anything, and then eventually realized he just couldn't do that anymore. He needed to go out and actually face it. And that's when it stopped being so dangerous to him. So that was nice.
I did like that there were some external representations of that, like the storms that were preventing him from going to Roke, and that like it was especially like if I were younger, I would have really like appreciated that, because I probably wouldn't have quite understood everything that was going on there. But I did appreciate some of those external realizations, so to speak, of the shadow.
Yeah, we bring up the metaphor being made real as the strongest. It's the aspect of fantasy that's the most compelling, and I think this is a beautiful demonstration of that, because it's really an internal struggle externalized onto the page, and externalized in a very fun way, where you get to fight dragons and shadow beasts and stuff.
Which was a very cool scene.
Yes.
The density of metaphors in this book is very high.
Yeah.
Agreed. When did you realize that the shadow was just Ged? And when do you think Ged realized that the shadow was just Ged?
I think he always knew, sort of, like deep down, right? Like,
well, deep down, sure, but like consciously?
Yeah. Consciously, I think right before he embraced it.
Yeah, right before.
Maybe when he left with Vetch, like around that time, but other than that, maybe right beforehand.
Yeah.
When did you? Because the first time I read it, I think consciously is when I realized at the same time as Ged.
I think the big hint to the reader, the big foreshadowing for the reader, is when he's talking to Fetch, and it's like, oh, a man came by who looked exactly like you.
Yeah, but by that point, we already know that it is a shapeshifter and could change the way it looks and stuff.
Yeah, that's true. But he had forced upon it a form by confronting it.
Yeah, and I
So
agree.
it wasn't shapeshifting anymore.
Literally every time the shadow came up, it was after he was dealing with, an internal problem that he had, whether it be ambition or insecurity or pride or whatever. So yeah, it's foreshadowed fantastically, and the ending is perfect in my opinion. So
yeah, I really like the consequences of his shadow being out in the world and uncontrolled, like it is. The most notable, which I think is the Archmage, who dies. Archmage who dies saving him basically, and then he feels horrible about it, as he would, right? Like if you kill the most powerful man in the world.
Dumbledore.
Which
and,
I did. Gosh.
Yeah, and the next head Archmage is like, yeah, that it really sucks that happened, but it's you're not allowed to just kind of waste your life now. He saved you, and you're not allowed to throw that away. You're not allowed to say that he was wrong for doing that.
Yep.
Did you notice that his face got scarred in the confrontation too?
Yeah, yeah, one side of his face, right?
You gotta have matching scars.
I did like the description of the Archmage being described as basically knowing how to walk into death on his own, just due to his age and wisdom. I think that worked well.
Yes, they know the way. That's really beautiful, and
yes,
that really reminded me of Pratchett when I was reading that, because
I had to say the same thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, you're coming around. You're coming around.
Are you coming around?
I never said that they weren't similar. I just said I don't think their prose styles are similar.
I think that you'll find Pratchett's prose in Le Guin's insults, and also in her philosophizing.
I think that's fair.
I could see that.
I feel like if they had co-written a book together, that would have been amazing.
Would have been amazing.
That would have been good.
Fantastic.
One of the great what ifs of the world. We need to talk about the scene with the dragon. I think this is one of the top dragon scenes in fantasy, and like an easy, like very much comparable to Bilbo versus Smaug in The Hobbit, right? I like this better than that, honestly.
So
I like
short.
this better.
It's so short.
It's perfect though, right?
The dragons, I love the dragons. I like how they're the traditional evil, greedy dragons, and I agree the way that Get handles it is just so cool and fun to read, and it's my favorite scene in the book, I think. And I like that he did it altruistically, only through developing a relationship to the people who were hurt by this. Even though he was trying to run from his shadow, he went out of his way to help these people, and he learned his responsibility as a wizard and the duty that comes the big duty.
And he keeps doing that too. Like he's given these easy ways out. Like the dragon is the most notable example. The dragon offers to tell him the name of the shadow. That could have been like the book right there. He'd be like, "Oh, the shadow's name is Ged," and he'd be like, "Oh, damn." And later on, it's the old power of the earth that tempts him. And when he's trying to heal the child, he really goes all out. He's really in risk it all just for this kid that he doesn't really even know, just because that's his duty. And I think all along the way, he's proving that he's a worthy wizard, and he has already grown wise, and he just needs to kind of realize that.
Like we all are.
Yeah. And of course, I love how none of the confrontations they're not about like the fight scenes. Those are very much secondary. Like he kills like 4 dragons, I think, and it's dealt with in like half a page, and it's still really narratively satisfying and excellent writing. And there's kind of a sense of awe that's like, oh, I didn't know that he was this powerful. But
yeah, we do see him turn into a dragon as well.
Yeah, he just turns into a dragon casually, right?
Yep.
Like this is not a power boost that he has to like work towards over the course of the book. It's like, oh, God, you need to turn into a dragon if you want to be a proper wizard. And he's just kind of like fighting towards that Rocky style the entire time. But yeah, it's something he instantly learns. And it's the character growth that matters, and the thematic turning. That's what's important, and I think that's
And he had the knowledge to leave the form immediately
yes.
when he was done with it, which young Ged probably wouldn't have done,
No,
and slightly older Ged doesn't do with Hawk.
I wouldn't. I'd stay a dragon.
Greedy, gold obsessed,
I'd stay a dolphin,
almost
like they
immortal.
say.
The like fact that a lot of dolphins in the ocean are just former wizards who decided
Yep.
they'd had enough of caring. That
It's fun to
was
play, man.
that was both
excellent.
dark and funny.
Yeah,
What does turning yourself into a dolphin do to the balance of the world?
nothing. You're just having fun the whole time,
Nothing.
and probably I don't know, getting high off blowfish.
It's
know-
ridding the world of capable wizards, which who are not doing their duty.
Yeah. Is it not an abdication?
It is.
Is an abdication evil in this world? Or are a certain number of abdications required?
It's all to maintain equilibrium.
Gotta read more books, I guess.
What's the equilibrium constant for wizards and dolphins?
See, if you're asking for constants like that, you're
40%.
you're coming at the book
Go back to
incorrectly.
Sanderson.
I completely
Yeah.
agree. I completely agree. But look, psychohistory says that
Oh man. Yeah,
but
Asimov and
but
Le Guin were diametrically opposed. Go ahead, Storm.
No, I mean, going back to I did like that in general, the magic, that it wasn't about, yeah, like I mean, it's like when the Force is described in Star Wars, where the rules don't matter so much as, again, the character growth and more of the concepts around it.
You don't like midichlorians?
I it is what it is, but prefer not.
What it is dumb. You could say it. It's fine.
Yeah, true. But and going back to the both how the actiony type stuff and how he resolves those conflicts, both with the dragon and with the shadow later on. That especially going with the ending, I thought it was fitting both in both of those scenarios that they're not resolved through combat. Because again, the book's not about Ged learning how to fight. It's the self-discovery and more of those themes that should be what resolves the conflicts, and not just can he, like, whether or not he learned the specific spell to transform into a dragon doesn't really matter in that scene.
Yeah.
yeah, one of his biggest mistakes was an incredibly strong act. And after
Yes.
that, he's just trying to become wise.
He's trying to fix all the damage that he did in a few moments, and it's a very common thing, right? For just to really screw up as a teenager and spend a lot of your life trying to fix those.
Trying to fix
mistakes and
your act of necromancy.
Yeah, exactly.
One,
We've all been
even
there.
I think with that was interesting is that going back to the equilibrium thing, at least that seems to be a pretty specific statement about, hey, if you try to either dominate something or make choices contrary to your own nature, that's like when you lose yourself. Not that like being more proactive wouldn't work for someone else that had a different type of balance, but for Ged and who he was, he was acting out of rage and anger and pride to prove himself to Jasper. And yeah, as you said, now he's suffering the consequences and trying to rectify his mistake for the rest of the book.
Yeah, and the dangers of trying to change the world. I really like how they're explored in this book. Shout out to the Lathe of Heaven for really going in on this concept in an extremely trippy way, but
in a very basic way. He tries to change the world by healing that child of what was it, red fever?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and was unable to do so, and shows the limitations of wizards.
And he knew he couldn't when he started. He said they taught
he
us
thought
that we
he
shouldn't.
thought he couldn't. He second guessed himself.
It's not just that he thought he couldn't. He said that we shouldn't be able to do this. Is what he was taught by the other wizards. Because if they said if they're already dead, you need to let them go. You can't chase after
Yes.
it.
Yes. But he
And
wasn't sure that they were beyond healing.
yeah,
He
and as
he
well, the after he vanquishes the dragon, his friend is like, you could have. He thinks that his friend is gently approaching him. It's like, you could defeat a dragon, but you couldn't save my kid.
Yep. And then he ran.
Yeah. Yep.
I have something to say about the temerity of people who call themselves heal-alls and then can't stop a fever.
I mean, heal sums is not. That's not catchy.
Heal a little.
Um, I actually really, really love the scene with Ogion and when he's coming back to him as a hawk, and Ogion basically puts him on his feet again, and how this really powerful wizard kind of tells him, Frank, it's like, you have to fix this. I can put you on the path. I can give you advice, but this is gonna be you in the end, and that's constantly told to him throughout the book. And I really like that because that's a huge part of coming age. Like, you gotta fix your own mistakes. That's how you grow. It's not through others fixing them for you, and it's a lonely process. It realizing that you have to stand on your own 2 feet for once, and I think it's conveyed beautifully here.
That scene's very good. I also like just meeting Ogion.
Yeah.
He wasn't with Ogion for very long, but in that short time, he's like, well, Ogion could do this. He's a great wizard, but he chose not to. And Ogion could, like, over and over again, he's like, oh, he could do these things, and why is he not doing them? I want this power. I want this power.
Yeah, and
And so
Ogion
he could
tells
learn
him,
temperaments from Ogion.
yeah, Ogion tells him, "I have what you need," and that's
Yep.
what Ged learns by the end of the book. He really learns humility and to not use his power unless he needs to, and
Just stay with
to use his
Ogion.
power when he does need to, like Ogion does. He's not afraid to. It's just he will not change the world unless he has to.
And that I love the. It's not that the university or the school that they went to was bad for him because he still learned a lot. But I really appreciated their lectures and their about the cosmic balance and how changing an item would really just change literally everything,
Yeah.
and how the responsibility that comes with that.
So it wouldn't change something that was many islands away.
And if you did want to cast a spell over the whole sea, you would need to know every single thing about every little part of the sea first and incorporate
Yep.
them all. And this is why naming magic is so hard in this world.
Very structuralist.
Yeah. Yeah, the book is actually it's very focused on dualism and opposed halves.
Very anti-monopoly.
Terrible game.
Just kidding. There's only one wizard school, and it is at Roke, and all the others are fake.
Well, there are other schools of magic. They're just all evil.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I did want to touch on the stone and that sequence. I thought it was great in general, just as a safe haven that's not at all a safe haven. Kind of an inverse. That was a pretty direct subversion of a couple of scenes from Lord of the Rings that I think worked really well. But in particular, the stone and the quote that it's very hard for evil to take hold on the of the unconsenting soul, and I thought that was a good,
That's a great line.
yeah, a good line and a
quote.
good, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That entire sequence is probably my favorite in the book. It's so the atmosphere is so you really feel lost along with Ged, and things feel shadowy and hard to pin down. And then Sarah comes along, and it seems like she really knows. She's a kindred soul, and she's deserving of pity, and she kind of like tries to wheedle her way in, and it almost works on Ged. And I think it also works on the reader as well.
I also am just a sucker for any sort of like treasure or magical item that's held behind multiple layers of wards and security.
Yeah.
There was a key of silver and a key of gold, and it was strewn among a multitude of other paving stones, but only one was the real one.
Yeah, like the Holy Grail.
Yep.
He chose wisely not choosing it. Are we good to start talking about More listener questions.
Yeah, I'm good.
Excellent. Sun Gamer asks, Le Guin has mentioned that she was specifically trying to tell a coming-of-age story divorced from standard patriarchal systems. Do you think she succeeded?
I don't really see that here.
If anything, like the women aren't important in this story, except for the evil one.
They're all a little bit evil.
Yep. All the women are a little bit evil.
Like his aunt tries to enslave him from like the age of 9.
And regularly makes love potions.
Yeah.
And curses people all the time.
Yeah.
She's
And
better
she's
with
like,
cursing than healing.
she's obviously not like a really evil person, but like still she does this she does these horrible things. I just kind of doesn't think about them. Yeah.
Yeah, and all the teachers at the school are older men, and his first mentor is Ojian.
There's a clear distinction between wizards and witches, and wizards are more powerful.
Oh, the virtuous woman in the story is Vetch's sister.
Yeah,
I like
she's
her.
good.
She's a good character, and
Okay,
she's meaningfully different, and she challenges them in a different way.
Okay, there's one.
Yeah,
That's all that matters, right? She represents all women.
I would say.
It's a metonym.
I'm just saying that this is not a story that's trying to be divorced from standards of the patriarchy.
Yeah, I agree. And
if you want that, read Tombs of Atuan. Yeah.
Read her other more feminist stuff if you want to. But I don't think this is really about patriarchy. If anything, it just falls into that trap.
Yeah,
right. It is playing with other tropes, but that's not really one of them.
Yeah. Read the next book, and that I think is much more about a thing she's trying to look at.
And actually, I think in the at least in the omnibus edition, or one of the introductions from her, she kind of brings that up a little bit, where she says that some of the later stuff she tried to do more of that, that she didn't think she did as good of a job as she could have in some of the earlier stuff, or maybe just this book. I'd have to.
He's pretty candid about how she could have made Left Hand of Darkness significantly better.
Yeah,
in that fashion, and much less reliant on like just being an inversion of patriarchal standards.
Yeah. Sun Gamer also asks, when, if ever, did the tears start? And did you find the ending with the Gebeth satisfying?
I never cried.
Never cried.
Very, very satisfying.
Yeah. Kip and I never cry. The ending was great.
If I didn't cry, that should say something, I guess.
Yeah, I felt bad for him when he was in I think it's Ismay, when he's like alone in the town. Like that was really sad, but I often cry but did not. The ending was very satisfying though. And shout out to Le Guin for having a fantasy novel where the villain was not a dark lord with an empire.
Yeah. The book feels sad and in like a wistful way, in the loss of innocence kind of way. Like you're probably not shedding tears, but it's like an ache.
When he discovered the body of his dead familiar, that was probably the closest I got.
That was heartbreaking. Yeah, the Otak.
Yeah,
this little rat boy.
Yep.
Like a Noshka. I bet the little rat thing in Noshka was inspired by that.
Did
maybe
Ghibli? Did Miyazaki ever read Wizard of Earthsea? I got the impression that he hadn't, and made a movie about it anyways.
His son made the movie.
He didn't make the movie. He's definitely read a Wizard of Earthsea. He's a big fan.
Okay.
He actually has a list of like children's books that he recommends, and it was on there.
I can see it. Lammy Lems asks, why don't more fantasy novels steal naming magic? I think they do. That's my hot take.
Well, he said more. Like if 99% of them stole naming magic, then there still could be more.
Like naming magic is pretty prevalent in fantasy. Like I think it's like out of the divisions of magic that you can have, it's like I think either the biggest or one of the biggest. And
definitely not the biggest. I'd say elemental's probably much higher.
Well, so the two blend together a lot.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Name of the Wind is both elemental magic and naming magic, right?
Yes. Well,
No, I would. It's not really.
it's
elemental.
sympathy
Well,
is not really elemental
yeah,
exactly.
sympathy certainly. Yeah, sympathy.
Not sympathy, but like for most of the well, for a lot of Name of the Wind, he's trying to find the name of the wind, right?
Yes.
Which is that is elemental, right?
Yeah.
Elements are used in the book.
Yeah. So,
It's fallen
yeah,
out of
why
favor
isn't
a
it used
bit.
more? I would say that so with the caveat that it is already used a lot, I would say it's not used more because it's very easy for authors who are action oriented to not know how to make it good. Because like if following the standard rules here, if you know something's name, then you have you have power over it, and the action combat is essentially resolved at that point, right?
Unless you add more systems on top of it, like Aragon.
Yeah, and it gets convoluted. Well, okay, I don't actually hate how Aragon does it, but like yeah, like that is a problem with Aragon, right? Like if once you know these, then it's like, well, what are you gonna do? You can't do anything.
It did lead to my biggest problem with Aragon.
Yep.
I haven't read it. I didn't really plan to.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I think everyone who's read Aragon will know this.
So over the prior to reading The Dispossessed and Left Hand of Darkness, like last year, the year before, I thought it was going to be an elemental magic quest. For some, I forgot why, but maybe that's just the impression that I had. And I had not read any Le Guin before that. And then I read Dispossessed and Left Hand of Darkness, and I was curious to see how that would mix with like a middle grade children's novel. So that I guess that was my expectation was, I don't know, something like The Dispossessed or Left Hand of Darkness, more so than basically something more dense than I think what it was. Or I should have phrased that after our conversation earlier. At least politically or culturally dense. But I think I think what we actually have is that it's her style from Left-Handed Darkness or Dispossessed, but in a more easily digestible way and I think that her style blends really well with the more simple is not the word I'm looking for, but simple-ish story. That I think it worked. That blend worked really well. So
to channel my inner AP, I would call this story simple but not simplistic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, and then I would say it surpassed my expectations, I guess, if I had to qualify it. But yeah, if I had to qualify it.
So for those who reread, what do you notice now that you didn't before, if anything? What feeling did you have this time in contrast to your first read?
A lot less confusion.
I'd say just this time I noticed the thematic connections a lot more. That's just right. And I paid, like I said, I paid more attention to the prose, and I enjoyed it more than I did last time because I wasn't really focusing on where the story was going or the mystery of the shadow or what it was.
Yeah, I was more willing to stop and smell the roses, metaphorically speaking, and knowing that it wasn't a quest to something, basically, besides self-discovery. I think that enhanced the experience, although I did like it quite a lot the first time as well.
I took a lot more time in the early book to look at what was his name before Sparrowhawk?
Oh,
Dooney.
Yeah.
Not a
to
Dunny.
look at Dooney's actions and his need to be acknowledged by others and his lack of willingness to be made fun of, or even just to like have any sort of vulnerability with other people or be interested in their stories and lives at the start. He's just so incredibly rude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I took more of a look at that this time around.
Cool. Is this a children's book?
Yeah, I would say it is.
If you read it to them.
Yeah. Yeah, you could read it to your son. Absolutely. That's what you're.
I did.
Good.
I don't think it's a children's book. I think it's I think it's a book that children can enjoy.
I agree.
Sure. I think, as I said at the beginning, I think it's a book that you can read at multiple stages of your life and come out with different appreciations of it. And when I first read it, I was more Ged, and now I'm more post-Ged.
Get it with Shadow.
Yeah, I fully integrated my Shadow. I've eaten it all up. I've realized my love for Shadow Throne.
I can agree with that too. Sure. Yeah.
You've both gained new classes.
Yeah. D asks, despite having a wizard as the main protagonist and a magical school, one of the earliest in the genre, that features prominently, Guin seems to want the magic to remain mysterious and strange. Do you think the book succeeded in doing so, and were there any elements of the magic that you think could have been handled better? I would say that I don't think she necessarily wants the magic to remain mysterious and strange. To me, it doesn't feel mysterious. It feels entirely intuitive. It feels everything makes sense about it to me, but it's obviously an intuitive kind of sense. It's not a mechanistic kind of magic, nor is intended to be. I think it's handled basically perfectly.
No comment. I just ditto.
Excellent.
Yeah, no, I pretty much agree. Yeah, pretty much agree with all that.
Excellent.
I mean, I think that the naming system incorporates incomplete oh god, what's that name? What is it? Gödel's incompleteness theorem?
Oh, man, let me try and figure out what you're trying to say here. I would say more Gödel's completeness theorem.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out the how exactly it was phrased. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how names come into this world.
Because it definitely seems like there are more things with names than people currently have names for.
Yeah, and it said that it's the dragons. Like, maybe it's just when a dragon looks at something, the name is what the dragon would think of it.
I did find it interesting how dragons can lie in the old tongue.
Yeah, because
other
it's their
people
tongue.
cannot. Yeah.
Yeah. That is actually really interesting in a metaphysical sense. And I think this all just kind of emphasizes how this doesn't feel like a Western world. It feels like an Eastern one, and not like an eternal one, rather than
It's a world with fuzzy and faded borders.
Yeah.
And red people.
And red
yep.
people. Yeah.
And red people.
And I think
and black people.
Yeah.
And light people.
Yes. Yeah, and I think the magic it generally works as just a metaphor for sense of self or identity, and that's makes a lot of stuff with it clicks well with the story.
Yeah.
Very Jungian.
Yeah.
Jungi.
Sorry, Jungi.
Yeah, we should talk about Jung a bit. I don't know much about Jung, but as far as I know, this is basically Jung.
Hurin is laughing every time you say Jung.
Did you guys? What do you guys think about that aspect of the story? I think it's great. As I said, like, the theme works perfectly, and the stages that he goes through when confronting his shadow are all very metaphorically resonant, and excellent character development and excellent theme development. And there's no notes. It all makes sense if you read it.
The very little I know about Jung, I agree. So I know he was concerned with the self and about archetypes and the shadow and confronting your shadow and identity and whatnot. So yes.
And integrating, which is obviously what Get does at the end.
Yes. I mean, I got no notes for Guin either. But I do think that a lot more people who read this book could stand to internalize that concept.
Yeah. Yeah, like we all have these parts of ourselves that, like, we tend to repress because they're not socially acceptable, or we find them uncomfortable. But yeah, you can't get rid of them, right? That's
maybe some people should repress them.
No, they should integrate them.
There's no spell for that.
Or master them would be a
Yeah, because if you repress them, they're just going to come out anyways. And I think everyone can notice that. Like, if you're repressing aspects of yourself, then they can just manifest in very unhealthy ways. and
Maybe you
kind
should
of-
have compassion for them.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
like podcasting.
Give people grace. Yeah.
D also asks, the emphasis on balance within the magic calls to mind some esoteric practices and philosophies such as Taoism, which you can see referenced in works like Star Wars. Some have also compared the goings-on with the shadow to Jungian concepts. Do you think Earthsea communicates these thematic elements effectively? It does so better than Legend of Korra Season 2 regardless. Yes, agree that it does better than Legend of Korra.
And a lot better than Star Wars too.
Yes,
And a lot better than...
Yeah.
famous auteur work, Legend of Korra.
Legend of Korra
Specifically
Season 2.
season 2.
Yeah, season 2 in particular.
Season 2, yeah.
Here, and you probably know Taoism the most considering you live in Japan, right?
It's not really big here.
Hmm.
They must have rejected it.
Yeah, from like the very little I know. Yep.
It's really just it's about balance, binary oppositions, and finding balance between those things.
And finding peace within the world and not letting yourself get destroyed on the lathe of heaven.
Yeah, basically.
I don't know where Star Wars currently stands on the topic of balance, but I know that it
Oh.
at one point
At one
had a
point.
lot of thoughts about it.
D also asks, if you had to be trapped within the body and mental capacity of any animal due to a desperate attempt to flee, what animal would you go with? Listeners will probably be able to guess. I would
Dolphin.
definitely... Huh?
Dolphin.
What? Dolphin. No, Raven. The animal I literally have tattooed on my chest. Or an orca, maybe.
Can I do a sandworm?
No.
Can I do dragon?
I'll allow it.
Why can he do dragon and I can't do sandworm?
I'm the host. I get to decide. You have to pick another animal, Aaron.
You could say worm.
Yeah, you could say worm. You know?
A unicorn.
Unicorn? Okay, that's fair.
I'd probably go with an eagle. I'd like flying. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
Oh, Pegasus.
Pegasus?
I know it's specific type of unicorn. A Pegasus unicorn.
No, an
Pegasus.
alicorn would be a unicorn with wings. A Pegasus does not have the horn.
Whatever. Like, give me something with wings that could fly that could also transform into a sandworm.
So you want to be a wizard?
I don't know the specific name for that one.
Ask Frank Herbert.
I don't think Frank Herbert would deign to answer the question. You have to ask his son, and his son would doubtless spoil the...
This is just Kieran wanting to do Dune episodes.
We should do Dune episodes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Have fun.
All right, we've gotten to everyone's questions. We've gotten to what everyone wants to talk about, I think. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
What did you do by the time Ged conquered his shadow and became one of the greatest wizards across Earthsea at the tender age of early 20s?
I think he was 19.
19?
What did I do?
How do you all stack up?
Oh, yeah, oh man.
Well, I did not accomplish that by 19.
Yeah, I blame my upbringing. I wasn't sent to wizard school. I didn't have the same opportunities.
The White Lotus didn't train you from the age of 3.
Yeah. Right? Like, I had no chance. Really, it's the world's fault. I'm going to blame the world and just kind of boil that resentment within myself. And
I think when I was a freshman in college, I pooped myself. So
that tracks. That tracks with what I know of you.
Sometimes there's no toilet and it's got to go.
Excellent. I think that's a great place to end the episode. What do you guys think?
That's the best.
Thank you.
Another classic Huron ending.
Another classic Huron ending. We should really just cut off right now. But anyways, thank you, listeners, for listening. Thank you, co-hosts, for co-hosting. You can find us on Discord, and we have a Twitter account at Green Team Pod, chaired by the lovely Panda.
You're doing really good.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll cover the Tombs of Atuan at some point. No promises on when, but yeah. So long.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.